Space Station. I was born in California, but I was raised in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. In high school, I really enjoyed and did well at math, and that's actually what drove me to wanting to study physics in college, was to understand the bigger picture of really how the universe works and operates. I got both my master's and PhD and studied with an incredible team at Fermilab doing high energy particle physics. At Fermilab, we collide protons and antiprotons at nearly the speed of light. The interesting part of particle physics is this is how we understand what's happening at the fundamental building blocks of nature. At the conclusion of my graduate studies at Fermilab, I had an opportunity to join the US Navy and fly for the Navy, and I absolutely took it. The Navy has been really good to me, but it was a shift in culture for sure. I've flown over 4,000 hours in over 45 aircraft, and what that allows you to do is just be ready for whatever's coming next and know that you're going to have to think on your feet. There is a link between aviation and physics, and for me, that link is just being ready for the unexpected. You have to be prepared for everything that might be thrown at you. You need to be able to look at problems in very different ways. And so I thought, man, being an astronaut kind of knows just all of those things.
NASA says it's accepting applications for new astronauts.
Of the roughly 3,500 applicants NASA is expecting, only about 15 will be selected for training.
And so I had applied for this position at NASA. I'll be honest, I had no intention of getting it. You know, you don't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. So I gave it a shot. And when I got that call, my family and my friends, we couldn't be more excited to be a part of this amazing experience. I'll tell you, I'm just so honored and humbled to be a part of this NASA team and to be able to contribute to the next generation of exploration in science. I couldn't be more lucky than to fly as a pre-flight. For me, going to space is an opportunity to do my job. We've been training and preparing for a long time, and to be honest, that's my priority, is to get up there and do what we've been trained to do. And the science is an incredibly exciting part of that for me too. That's why we explore space. We do things that make this world worthwhile.
Well, good morning. It's another beautiful mid-winter Michigan morning here on Earth. Welcome everybody to this very special Saturday morning physics event. We're really excited to have you all here on campus in this beautiful new classroom and facility. And I want to extend a warm welcome to those who are joining us remotely. I'm Physics Professor Tim Chupp, one of the organizers of Saturday Morning Physics, along with my colleague Professor Roy Clark, Carol Raybook, and Monica Wood, and today a crew of many providing technical and logistical support. I want to take just a moment to acknowledge the financial support Saturday Morning Physics patrons provide, and in fact, so many individual members of our Saturday Morning Physics community. We're grateful to have the support of the Dr. Mary Lois Tiffany Endowment, the Hideko Tomozawa Endowment, the Van Loo Family Endowment, and the Walker family. Many of you are regular Saturday Morning Physics patrons, and many of you are here for the first time. It's easy to understand the excitement of so many people in this room and the draw of taking part in a live exchange with an astronaut on the International Space Station. Saturday Morning Physics is a unique opportunity for the physics department to reach out to the community, bringing the excitement and the impact of science, not just physics, to the broadest possible audience. Often hundreds join us in person and online Saturday mornings to learn. We hope you will continue to join our events, including the exciting lineup that we have for the winter and spring, and there will be more on that later. Now I'd like to introduce some special guests that we have joining us here today. We are expecting Representative Debbie Dingell, who I think has not yet arrived. Also here today are Michigan Provost Lori McCauley, and Dean of our college, Ann Curzan. Also like to welcome Associate Dean Professor Barb Meek, and Associate Vice President for Research and Professor of Physics, Brad Orr. And finally, Physics Department Chair David Gertis, who unfortunately could not join us, but is attending remotely, and he has turned the microphone over to me. Welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining us. You've already been introduced to Navy Captain Josh Cassada, PhD, through the video that we saw a few moments ago. Josh also has a direct connection to the University of Michigan through the company he founded with two of his college friends. Yes, he is an entrepreneur as well. Their company, Quantum Opus LLC, provides high-speed, low-loss photon detectors for next-generation experiments in quantum optics, quantum computation, communication, biophotonics, and remote sensing. Josh and his partners worked with the Lori Nanofabrication Facility on North Campus here at the University of Michigan to help develop their products. So I want to tell you how today's event will go. The main event, of course, is our meeting with Josh Cassada, and that will start actually at about 11:15. Before that, we're so grateful to have Professor John Foster, who will provide us with an introduction to the International Space Station and NASA's current and future missions. I will introduce John more completely very shortly. For our meeting with Josh, the ISS will beam down video and audio of Josh, but he will only be able to hear us. He won't be able to see us. So only audio will be sent up to the space station. We're told that there is a delay of about 2 seconds that we'll have to get used to rather quickly. We haven't tested this, so we'll all figure it out together, okay? Most of Josh's time with us will be spent answering your questions. As most of you know, we have been inviting and collecting questions over the past few weeks, and it's been amazing. We've received over 150 questions from fans of all ages, from preschoolers to teachers to military and civilian retirees. A panel reviewed all of the questions, and we selected about 25 to send to Josh, and they will be read by their authors here today. We will get to as many questions as possible. It's very exciting. Josh will have to return to his duties at about 11:40, and that will leave about 20 minutes for those in the audience to ask questions, in particular of Professor Foster. We'll conclude just before noon with a special giveaway, which is another Saturday Morning Physics First. So, moving on, it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor John Foster. Professor Foster is a professor of nuclear engineering, applied physics, and a member of the Graham Sustainability Institute, as well as a veteran Saturday morning physics lecturer. He grew up in Mississippi, and he did his undergraduate study in physics at Jackson State University. He came to Michigan first in 1991 as a graduate student in the applied physics program and did his dissertation research in the lab of now College of Engineering Dean Alec Gallimore. John received his PhD in 1996, and after a postdoc position at Wisconsin, he was a senior engineer at NASA's Glenn Research Center from 1998 to 2006. In 2006, he returned to Michigan as a professor in the College of Engineering. John has received numerous awards and recognitions for his research and teaching, and he asked me not to dwell on these, but I do emphasize a few. The Nuclear Engineering Faculty Teaching Award, a NASA Mentor of the Year Award, as well as being a Fellow of the American Physical Society. John, thanks so much for joining us for this event and for your flexibility and creativity with our program.
Thank you. Well, this is interesting. So get a pop-up when I go to the laptop. Okay, yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm the warm-up act for the astronaut, so I'm gonna, so I will get started here. So what I'm going to do, in the spirit of being a warm-up act, I'm going to give you a warp speed tour of the U.S. Space Station program. Basically, we're going to go through the years from the past to the present and to the future as well, what NASA's planning in regards to space stations. So we're going to talk all about space stations today. And so I have a nice shot of International Space Station with spacecraft who has docked to space station. I like this picture. So we'll start from the early beginnings, then move through the Apollo era and finally to International Space Station. And we'll end with some future space stations planned by NASA. And so hopefully I'll be able to get through this before I get pulled off the stage. Okay, so I want to start with a definition. So first of all, the concept of a space station. What is a space station? So I thought about this, and so I put this together. Space station is an orbiting platform, one that's capable of sustaining life for long periods of time, human life, extended duration. But it can also serve as a laboratory. The International Space Station is a national lab now. A way station, if you go into Mars, you want a place to like stop in and refuel, perhaps, get supplies, or a construction site to build larger vehicles. And interestingly, this concept of space stations for these types of applications was thought about a long time ago and written about seriously in the 1920s. Where they conceived of these rotating wheels type space stations to produce artificial gravity. In the 50s and 60s, Wernher von Braun, who's considered widely the father of modern spaceflight, also was a fan of these rotating wheels, and he thought that they would be critical in NASA's space endeavor. It would be a place to assemble large spacecraft in orbit to go to the moon and Mars. It turned out in the 60s, though, the Saturn V was such a powerful rocket, it could deliver all the hardware needed for the Apollo mission in one launch. And so NASA designed a lot of space stations in the 60s, but nothing was ever built. It was, in fact, the U.S. Air Force that had the most serious space station development activity, and they actually built hardware. And I don't know if many people were aware of this. They actually launched stuff, and we'll talk about that. It was a classified program. But before talking about that, let's get some stuff out of the way. So first of all, in space, and it's pretty funny, isn't it? Yeah, in space, so you have the, that's real. So people are floating around, right? So in space, so there's one sort of misconception that the reason why the people float in space is because there's no gravity. Well, it turns out that the space station is only 250 miles above the surface of the Earth, so the gravity is actually about the same as it is on Earth. It's actually 90% that. And so the reason why people float in space is because they're in free fall. You can think of the space station as falling along a trajectory toward the Earth, but its tangential velocity is high enough that fall trajectory is actually a circle. So they're falling in a circle. So they're in a constant state of free fall. And if you're in a constant state of free fall, everything is going to float around you. And so that's just to dispel the gravity myth. But probably sure you're aware of the free fall thing. The second thing is space stations don't stay in orbit forever, especially low Earth orbiting space stations. In fact, this is a movie from ESA that shows the International Space Station, cartoon of it, orbiting the Earth, and notice that orbit is getting smaller and smaller, it's decaying. And that's because the space station is flying through the atmosphere, the upper atmosphere, and there's drag. And the drag slows it down. So without booster rockets on board, some kind of propulsion, it would eventually burn up. So you need propulsion to maintain your orbit. So every now and then it has to be reboosted. So that's that. So let's get back to now the U.S. Air Force Manned Orbital Laboratory. They call it the MOL or MOL. And again, this was a classified program. And so the idea was the Air Force realized the opportunities that space afforded from a surveillance standpoint and also military experiments. And so they began building hardware. Basically, it was a cylindrical space station. Astronauts would be in this workshop here. And a Gemini capsule would be used to send the astronauts to the space station and carry out those experiments and surveillance. This is a shot inside it. They actually launched a mock-up. So they built hardware and they launched this. They reused the Gemini space capsule as well. That was the first reused spacecraft ever. Gemini. This was successful, but unfortunately in 1969 the program was canceled before they could have time to man-rate this Titan launcher here. So that was that. But they built hardware. An interesting little fact about this particular program: three classes of astronauts were were trained to fly on the space station, and one of them, shown here, is Robert Lawrence. Robert Lawrence would have been the first African-American astronaut. All the astronauts from that program went to fly on to Apollo and also the space shuttle. He's a bit of a prodigy. He graduated from high school at 16, got his college degree at 20, and a PhD in physical chemistry. So it's unfortunate that he was unable to make the transition to an astronaut. He died in a jet test crash. So 1969, this interesting program was canceled, but the following year, Richard Nixon, who canceled that program, he authorized NASA to build the Skylab. So Apollo program was winding down. There's a lot of hardware, so let's use that excess Apollo hardware and build a space station. They built a Skylab, which was an interesting space station in itself. It's huge. And so he built it out of the leftover pieces, these command modules, and also the station itself was built out of a upper stage of a Saturn rocket, which is clever. 3 missions to Skylab. It didn't last too long, but they as you'll see, they learned quite a bit, and unfortunately it burnt up over the Indian Ocean in Australia in 1979, and we'll talk about how that happened. That's that drag thing. So here is a Saturn 1B second stage. This is what the Skylab was built out of. You just take the fuel tanks out and you build a workshop, put it in there. And that's what the Skylab was. It's simple. It was the early 70s. It was a budget crunch, inflation, and so I keep getting pop-ups on my one. Okay, so here's a picture of Skylab being launched. Skylab was launched actually on a Saturn V into orbit, but the astronauts to visit the Skylab were launched on a smaller rocket, a Saturn 1B. And this just gives you the size and scale of the 1B compared to a Saturn V. This is the same launch tower, but it had to have this little toadstool-like thing to sit on to launch on a Saturn V rocket, which I find that's kind of amusing. But that's how the astronauts got there. And so once a Skylab left the launch pad, all sorts of problems happened during its ascent. It was almost like, what didn't go wrong? The Skylab itself is a miracle in regards to the fact that it made it into orbit safely. Because as it was going up, the micrometeoroid shield, which also doubled as a thermal protection shield, ripped off. And in the process of ripping off, it jammed one of the solar panels of Skylab. And as it continued to make its ascent, when the shroud containing the space telescope here blew off because of the pyrotechnics, you had to release the shroud, it blew off the rest of that solar panel that had been partially deployed. So you have a situation, you have no thermal protection, you have no micrometeoroid shield, you lost one of your solar arrays, and the second one has been jammed because the part of the micrometeoroid shield jammed it. And so when the astronauts visited, they had their work cut out for us. First of all, it was just basically too hot to actually occupy. And so they were clever. They knew these problems. It's a bad day when you're getting a signal that says your solar panels have deployed when you're going into orbit, right? I mean, it's like, you can't deploy a solar panel while you're... So the command module, the astronauts arrived, and they came with some repair kits, one of which was a parasol that they put over the Skylab sun-facing side to shield it from the solar radiation, the thermal energy from the sun because it was overheating. So you reflect the sunlight. Secondly, they labored hard, very hard, and eventually they were able to free one of the solar panels. They then oriented the Skylab so it was perpendicular to the sunlight. As you can see here, it's fully illuminated, and they were able, in this particular orientation, able to get enough power to carry out the experiments. And then the rest is kind of history. The Skylab was a successful mission. It's a triumph from disaster. It showed that the can-do spirit of NASA and the power of having humans in space to make these types of repairs. There's the command module docked with the space station. So the first mission to Skylab, the repair mission, lasted 28 days, and a lot of that was repair. Second mission was 60 days, and the final mission was 84 days. And just for reference, Apollo 17, which was the longest astronauts had been in space, was only 12 days. So they broke records left and right. So this was a very successful program. A lot of life science was carried out. They had spiders growing webs in this Skylab. And probably the most important, in my opinion, discoveries was in the solar science. So Skylab, let me just flip back here, had this huge solar telescope, and they made a lot of interesting observations about the sun, especially the solar atmosphere. They observed these coronal holes, and I have a little movie to show of that. But a coronal hole is basically dark regions in the upper atmosphere of the sun, and that's where you have strong magnetic field lines, and it spews out very high velocity solar wind. And so this is a space weather because solar wind affects satellites on orbit, and also health of astronauts if you're poorly shielded. So here's an old school movie that they filmed on Skylab. They didn't have digital cameras. They actually had film. They literally had to go out, do an EVA, and get the film out of the camera. But if you can see this dark area here, this is a dark region in the upper atmosphere of the sun, the solar corona, and that's still being studied to this very day. So a lot of interesting solar science as an astronaut at the solar console, solar telescope console. But the sun give it and the sun take it away. It turns out that when Skylab launched, we were in the middle of sort of the solar maximum. So the sun goes through cycles where the activity of the sun is high and low over the period is about 11 years. And so it turns out that Skylab in the 70s here was not quite in solar minimum, and the sunspot cycle was pretty high. The activity that they observed from the sun was substantial. This is the largest solar prominence ever observed from Skylab. And so when the sun is active like this, it heats the upper atmosphere, and the upper atmosphere expands. And so that increases the drag for spacecraft. And so the last Skylab mission, they tried to reboost this Skylab, and so that it was predicted to orbital decay due to drag in the early 80s, around 81. And by then, they hoped that the space shuttle would be ready, and the space shuttle would rescue it. The space shuttle was over budget and behind schedule, and unfortunately, it wasn't able to get there. And even if it were able to fly a year earlier, this effect of heating up our atmosphere, it increased the drag so much that it came down in 1979. And so it burned up in the upper atmosphere, and parts of it actually landed in uninhabited areas of Australia. There's a piece of the oxygen tank there. And so Skylab was a success. The fact that it wasn't rescued was kind of sad, but that wasn't the end of the story for the U.S. Space Station program. And so it would take until 1984. So 1974 was the last mission of Skylab. 1984, President Ronald Reagan announced or authorized NASA to build a space station. And that space station would be called Freedom, and it would take only 10 years to build according to their estimates. So NASA got to work. They designed the first iteration called the Power Tower. Scientists didn't like the Power Tower's geometry for experiments, so they went to the dual kill approach. Dual kill, too complicated, too many launches, and so it went to another iteration. In 1987, you see the true space station Freedom, the sprawling complex, which would require a massive number of shuttle launches to assemble. And so, very expensive, and so it had to be scaled back, and it became Space Station Fred. And the reason why it's called Fred, and this is the joke for NASA people, is that they take letters from Freedom and you get Fred. That's what's left. So it's like a small piece. And the writing was on the wall then. $11 billion spent over about 10 years, and that was too much. So they canceled the space station program. It was canceled. And so, but that's not the end of the story, because in 1993, Clinton authorized NASA to build a space station again, and this time it would be an international space station, and Russia would be a major partner of that international space station. And so that came to pass, and after 1993, a mere 5 years later, the first piece of the space station was launched. That was Zarya. So now we're in the era of the International Space Station, and so we're going to start going a little bit faster so that I don't run out of time. So the International Space Station, what is the mission goals of the International Space Station? So it's to enable deep space exploration, and basically a lot of this is how humans how respond to microgravity, for long duration stays, because we want to go to the moon and Mars and stay there for a while. Foster commercial space industry. You can grow proteins and all sorts of materials that you can't ordinarily grow on the surface of Earth. Conduct research to benefit humanity. All the research there is not just for developing space flight capability, long duration living in space, but also to improve things here on Earth. We observe things like climate and also medicines that could be used for people here on Earth. Inspire humankind. This audience, this full room of people has been inspired by space, so it's definitely doing that. And that got me into science is NASA as well. It's enabling international collaboration. It's an international space station, and it's infrastructure. It's been up there for a while, and so we've had people in orbit for a very long time. In fact, it's been continuously operated for the past 22 years. That is impressive. We have people in orbit 22 years straight. And it's international. 263 unique individuals from 20 different countries have visited the space station. The space station is being tracked now on one of our laptops. But the space station's period is 90 minutes. And basically, that means they see 16 sunrise and sunsets every 24 hours, which is pretty interesting. It's spacious. It's about, as far as the living volume, it's about the size of a 6-bedroom house, and it's 2 baths and a small gym. It's not bad, right? Yeah, I'd buy that. The modules took 42 flights to assemble. Most of those were by the space shuttle. 6 ships can dock with the space station at any time. That's pretty cool. The space station is green. It's solar powered, and they recycle their water. And so far, and counting, 257 spacewalks. And Josh Cassada completed one recently to install solar arrays, the rollout solar arrays, and he may talk about that. So this is a picture that shows sort of the scale of the space station placed over a football field here. We have the wild card playoffs coming up today, and you can kind of get a feel for the size that way. Interestingly, International Space Station's volume is really similar to Skylab. That also puts into perspective how big Skylab was and how big those upper stages are. It is an international space science laboratory. Over 3,000 experiments have been carried out in the space station. And there's some notable laboratories on board, the Cold Atom Laboratory, where they've able to produce these Bose-Einstein condensates. There's the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer, which is used to look for dark matter particles. There are the twin studies. I know you've heard about the 2 astronauts. One was on Earth and the other in space, and they were able to compare their physiology changes, which is a lot of papers have been published on this. A lot of Nature articles have been published on these things. This is a picture of a experiment on the space station called a dusty plasma experiment. It is dust particles in a plasma, and they're in this free fall condition. So you see all these interesting instabilities. Why are they interested in dust in space? Well, we believe that dust may be nucleation sites for formation of larger particles and ultimately planets. So it's a sort of important experiment to carry out. Okay, so now we're going to do the tour of the space station itself, and this is where I will go fast. So what I'm showing here is just the places where the astronauts sort of congregate. There's an astronaut in his bedroom sleeping there. Another one is working out on the treadmill. But so we're going to take a look at the space station piece by piece, not all of it, just the major components. And the first one we start out with is the functional cargo block, Zarya. That's the first component to ever be launched for a space station. It was built by Russia, and this was the piece that they started connecting other parts to. So there's a picture of an astronaut inside Zarya. The first component that the U.S. sent up to space station is Node 1 called Unity, and there's a picture of Unity. These modules are large. They're like 4.5 meters in diameter by 4.5 meters long. These are, I shouldn't call this a module because this is a node. These are the connector pieces to connect the larger modules together. And so these things typically aluminum, about 2 inches thick, and has some micrometeoroid plating and Kevlar to also protect from micrometeoroids, in addition to thermal, multi-layer insulation for thermal regulation. So that's that. So it's called Unity. The name Unity is sort of an apt one because it unifies the U.S. space station with the Russian side of the space station. So the name fits. So the next module shown here in the red box is called Harmony. Its name is also an apt one because the Harmony node connects all of the other space laboratories. It connects the Japanese, the European, and the U.S. Space laboratories together. Here's some pictures of it. And also an interesting thing about Node 2 is that it has 4 sleeping quarters in it as well. So the astronauts sleep in this particular area. So moving on to Node 3, it's called Tranquility. Tranquility is a very important node for reasons will become obvious in a second. So there's a little workout room in Node 3. Also, there's the bathroom, which is really important. You need to know what a bathroom is on the station, right? And so you have some equipment in here. You have the can for, literally it's a can for number 2, and this is tubes for number 1. And also in this section, you have the cupola, which is this beautiful window section that you can observe EVA activity and just meditate on the world as it rotates below you, shown here. So that's the cupola. And that's another picture. 2 people can actually fit in this at any given time. So the next module that we take a look at here is the essentially the propulsion module. This is Zedna. It is all Russian piece, and it contains the propulsion for space station to orbit, to avoid orbital debris, and also to reboost the space station. You can see cargo ship docked there as well. Often it's the cargo ship's thrusters that actually are used for the reboost. But this service module does have its own propulsion and fuel on board as well. Also, this particular module has the second bathroom in the space station. So you have 2, one on the Russian side and the other in Node 3. So those are those. The space station solar panels and all of the modules are sort of attached to this integrated truss structure shown here. Solar panels here, and you have radiators to reject waste heat. This is a picture of the integrated truss structure here. It's very important. It's like the backbone of the space station. Now let's take a look at the space lab. So spacecraft visit the space station to bring the experiments. The U.S. Space Lab is called Destiny. So they're larger. These labs are larger than those nodes. They are about 10 to 11 meters long, but the diameter is about the same, 4.5 meters. So they're big, and you can see all of the laboratory experiments on the walls. So wall-to-wall experiments, they work on all 4 surfaces. So they have flat panels here. So they work on all surfaces. to get the work done. And they know where everything is too. Which is fascinating. When you look at that, it's a lot of stuff in these modules.
John?
Yeah.
Hi. Josh will be joining us any minute now.
Okay,
So we want to be ready.
Okay. Yeah. So 1 minute then.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me. So that went faster than expected, but I was expecting to get the jet jerked off the stage. So what I want to show you, just really quickly, is the next space station that NASA is planning on building. That's called Gateway, and it's going to be in orbit between the Moon and Earth, and it will look like this. Its size is much smaller than the International Space Station, but it'll be a waypoint for astronauts on their way to the Moon. This is the habitable module. This is the exploded view. Hardware is already being built, and what's cool about it, it will contain plasma thrusters to maintain its orbit between the Moon and Earth, and that's going to be a first. And so I guess that's probably it from me. Thank you for listening.
John, thanks for that really brilliant and illuminating introduction to the space station and space technology. We wanted to be ready. While we wait, I have to correct a faux pas on my part, which is in the introductions at the beginning, I failed to introduce Mayor Christopher Taylor, Ann Arbor's mayor. Sorry, Chris. Okay, also, while we wait, you may wonder where the space station is now. So it's possible, as John mentioned, to track this on your cell phone. I checked a couple minutes ago on my computer. I don't know if anybody else has been watching that right now, but I think it's basically currently over Siberia or so. And over the course of our expected meeting with Josh, it should end up traveling all the way to the South Pacific, but you can check me on that. Another interesting fact, how fast is it moving? I had to fill the time, right? How fast is it moving? Any ideas? Some miles per hour. I didn't exactly hear that number. But let's see if we can figure it out. It's very close to the Earth, actually. Yes, very good. For those who didn't hear, that's about 25,575 kilometers per hour, or 17,000 or so miles per hour. Is it always traveling at the same speed? No, all right? So as you track it, you can see its speed changing. And you may also wonder how this event came about. So actually, NASA called us. The space station astronauts do many events where they interact. And the astronauts also, those events are chosen by NASA, most of them, but the astronauts get to choose too. And Josh chose us. So we can thank Josh for that. And about a month ago, only a month ago, we got a call from NASA. David Gertis, our department chair, got a call from NASA giving the possibility of this and the idea that we should include this in a Saturday morning physics event. So for the past month, we've been putting it together, and we're really very grateful that we have it here. So I don't have any more fillers prepared, but it's 11:14, and we're told that NASA is very punctual. So let's just wait.
University of Michigan Saturday morning physics. This is the International Space Station. How do you hear?
Hi, this is Tim Chupp. And probably 500 people here in the audience on the Ann Arbor campus, and many more joining us online.
That is so cool. Well, I am so excited to be a part of this, as is everybody else up here on the International Space Station. This is a really special opportunity for us, and I can't thank you enough for making me a part of it, and hopefully you save a donut or two for me when we get back.
Is there anything you'd like to start with, Josh?
Well, I'll tell you what, I know that we've got a big audience there and a limited amount of time for some questions, and I'm really excited to get to them. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands we do feel incredibly fortunate to be up here and be representing you and the rest of the globe in what we're doing here in human spaceflight. But nobody does this alone. This is a team sport, and we just happen to be the ones up here, but tens of thousands of people make this possible. So thank you for all your support down there, and to all the people who are making it happen.
Okay, great. Josh, we sent you a lot of questions, and just a heads up, we're going to go in order, but start with the questions from the people who are actually here in the audience and can ask them live. And so let me start. The first question, actually, it's not a question. It's from a college buddy named Alex Tashian, and he says, "Hey, Josh, it's your old college buddy. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that I'm watching you with my wife and kids at home, and we're all rooting for you. Alex from Albion, go Brits."
That's super cool. First of all, go Brits. And it does mean so much to me that so many people from around the world are following along with what we're doing up here and keeping us in your thoughts, and really, again, being the inspiration for us to do this work that we're excited to do and to explore on behalf of humankind. So thank you, Alex, and your family.
Great. Okay, our first question is from a preschooler, Vivian, who's an aspiring astronaut. In fact, we call her Astronaut Vivian.
Hi, Astronaut Josh. I'm Astronaut Vivian. What rocket ship did you ride to the International Space Station?
Hi, Astronaut Josh. This is Astronaut Vivian's mom. She wants to know, what rocket ship did you ride to the International Space Station?
Hello, Astronaut Vivian. This is Astronaut Josh. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning. We launched from Florida back in October. We launched on the Falcon 9 rocket, and we were in what's called the SpaceX Crew Dragon. And I actually have a little planet here to kind of show you how we did that, how we got to the space station. So here's Florida, and of course, so what's really nice about being up here is I can hold the mic right here and just leave it. So the Earth rotates like that. And so we launched from here and then went into an orbit, actually, like that. And then we plugged into the International Space Station, and we've been here for 4 months. We just went over 100 days yesterday. So it's been quite a ride. We had to catch up to the space station, and now we're on a new spacecraft with our spacecraft plugged into the front.
G'day Josh, my name's Matt and I'm an aerospace engineering student here at the University of Michigan. First, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be able to talk with us today. It really is a privilege to chat with you. I was curious to know, what did you find most surprising upon your arrival to the International Space Station?
Hey, Matt, I can tell from your accent you're from downstate, probably somewhere in the Detroit area, am I right? I'll tell you what, I probably shouldn't say this, but my very first thought when I came into the International Space Station was, what a mess. And the reason is, if you've ever seen a laboratory, especially from a researcher who's been in there for a couple decades, you know, you tend to build up and accumulate a lot of different stuff. Right now, I'm in the Japanese module, which is really kind of our most tidy module, but you can probably still see there's a bunch of cameras and cables and all kinds of experiments. We use the ceiling and the floor and the walls all the same. But boy, if you could see the U.S. lab, there is so much going on in there. Not just the computers and the experiments, but we've actually got a place where we do our exercise. There's a bike in there. We've got a station where we do our robotics. We can control the robotic arm of the space station. We fly it from in there. In fact, my friend Nicole was flying the robotic arm when I was on the end of it when I was doing a spacewalk probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. So it's really, really crowded in there. But the really neat thing is we've got a team down in Mission Control in Houston and all around the globe who kind of turn it all into this controlled chaos. They know exactly where everything is, and if we can't find it, we make a call and they tell us exactly where it's hidden in this cable and this connection. So, yeah, it appears to be a mess, but man, it is a highly functioning mess.
I'm Nathan. I'm 5.
What's your question?
What does it feel like with no gravity?
Hi, Nathan. I'm Josh. I'm 49. If you've ever been in a pool or if you've been in a lake and you've been floating, you just kind of relax and float. I don't know if you can see right now, my feet aren't even touching. So I'm just floating here. So it feels very much like being in water and just floating. But the big difference is there's no resistance. I can move my arms, so not like underwater. I can move around just fine. And also, unlike being underwater, I can breathe just fine. We actually bring our own air up here. You know, in fact, if I was outside of the space station, I wouldn't be able to breathe. But in here, I'm just floating and being able to breathe the air that we have here in the space station.
Hello?
Hello. Hi, Josh. I'm Ansh, and my question is, how close was your training to the real deal?
Hey, Ansh. Well, I'll tell you what. It is remarkable what we have on the ground to get ready for this. We have mock-ups of the space station all over the planet. We've got them there in Houston. We've actually got a couple in Houston. We've got one where we walk around inside the habitable volume, which is the place where we can live, where I'm talking to you from right now. And we do a lot of training in there to get ready for things like emergencies or malfunctions, and even the stuff that isn't going wrong, the stuff that we just need to do on a daily basis. And so we get trained really well there. We have a giant pool where we train for spacewalks. Again, just like we were talking about, you can float in water, and that's about as close as we can get to training for a spacewalk. We've got similar mock-ups for the country-specific modules. We have a Japanese module where we do something similar to get to know their systems and their responses to different off-nominal situations. We have one for the European module. So we've got these training tools that we use extensively on the ground. But I'll tell you what, there is no way you can be ready for weightlessness until you've done it. We do have an airplane that was affectionately known as the Vomit Comet that would go up and do a parabola-type flight path. And so for about 20 to 30 seconds, we could get weightlessness. But here we are. We're in constant free fall, and we've been doing it for over 22 years. So it's really something you got to experience, but we do our best to be ready for anything else that we can when we're on the ground.
Hi, Josh. My name's Dylan. I'm a 5th grader from at Creekside. My question is, do you get dizzy or motion sickness floating around in the space station?
Hey, Dylan. Well, you can. Not everybody does. but you can. We spent 29 hours, as we say, going uphill. So after the launch, before we had plugged into the space station. So there you're in a little capsule. And then when you come into the spacecraft, it's a very different feeling. And I'm sorry, when you come into the space station, it's just a very big, voluminous place to be, and sometimes that can be disorienting. So we actually have a term for it. It's called space motion sickness. It's a little bit like being sick on a boat, if you've ever felt like that, or on an airplane. But the really nice thing is, if you do get it, it lasts probably less than a day, and then you're fine forever. As far as getting dizzy, that doesn't tend to happen, but we can make it happen. Let me invite my friend Nicole in here for just a second. So this is one of the challenges of being in space, is that if you ever want to drill something, you got to be locked down. This is Nicole. She's a U.S. Marine.
Hi, great to join you all this morning.
So if you try to drill something in space, you're actually going to try to spin the other way unless you find a way to lock yourself down. So let me show you one thing that Nicole and I have been messing around with. And so as a U.S. Marine Corps fighter pilot, she's rarely dizzy, but I can guarantee you she is right now.
Just say your question. You don't have to introduce yourself.
My question is, how do you sleep when you're spinning and floating and not run into things?
That's a great question. So, first of all, we don't spin except for what we just did. But right now we are falling. And it's a little bit like if you can imagine being in an elevator and somebody cuts the cable. So if they cut the cable, the elevator's just going to fall. The best part of this is, though, the elevator's never going to hit the bottom. So we're just constantly falling. And the way we sleep is we strap ourselves to the wall. So I've got a little sleeping bag in my crew quarters. A crew quarters is just really a closet. And in fact, we've got 4 of them. We've got one that's overhead, we've got one that's on one side, one that's on the other side, and one's in the basement. I'm in the basement. And so on the wall, I just strap my sleeping bag to the wall, and I get in. I don't even know if I'm upside down or not because I'm not sure which way is up, because there really is no up and there is no down. I wasn't sure how well I would sleep, but it turns out I am sleeping great up here. It's incredibly relaxing. The biggest problem is the position that you're in to sleep is the position you are in for the rest of the day. So you got to try really hard not to fall asleep at work.
Hi, my name's Kieran Garcia, and what happened when the ISS had to dodge space debris in October?
Hi, Kieran. Yeah, this does happen sometimes, and we are so grateful for the team and multiple teams on the ground who keep us safe. Yeah, it is. It's kind of messy in low Earth orbit. There's a decent amount of debris out there. You can Google it and see a picture of all the different objects out there that we're tracking and making sure that we stay safe from. It's probably something I'm not going to Google until I'm safely back on the ground. But I'll tell you, we've got a team that uses what we call a pizza box. So if you can kind of envision the shape of a pizza box, they track all of the different things that have their own trajectory. And if something's going to come through that pizza box, we can tell ahead of time. And so we're going to have to move the space station a little bit to make sure that the chances of getting hit by that thing are incredibly small. And so we've got incredibly smart people on the ground who make that happen, but they also do it at the right time. Right now, we are in space and we're falling around the planet. But there is just a little bit of atmosphere up here. There are still a couple molecules. So the space station drags down a tiny bit over the course of a month or two. And so every so often we have to do a boost, which means we just got to come up a little bit. So we fire some engines and we get ourselves up to a different spot. Sometimes we can just do that a little early, and that will help us put the space station where it needs to be and get us out of the way of any debris. So that's what we did on back in October. And in fact, we're going to do a boost next month, which actually I got to tell you is super cool. I'm really excited because what I like to do is I hang out right in the middle of the space station, so I make sure I'm not touching anything, and then I let the jets fire and the space station moves around me. That's pretty cool.
Hi, my name is Naman, and I'm a freshman at the University of Michigan. My question is, how does the loss of gravity affect functions like blood flow in the ISS? And would you be willing to share any experiences where you felt some of these changes take place?
Sure, I'm an open book. I'll share anything. You're right. The lack of gravity, even though there's plenty of gravity, but being in free fall can affect things. And you see it in different crew members. Sometimes faces get a little puffy. That's because we don't have the same flow. We don't have the same pull of blood down to our lower extremities. And so we have what's called fluid shifts. In fact, we lose probably a couple pounds worth of just water weight when we get up here because our body doesn't need all that fluid. But it changes even the shape of your heart. You know, the heart kind of starts as like an ellipsoid, but up here it becomes a little bit more spherical. So there are definitely effects on cardiovascular phenomenon. But I'll tell you what, we have to work really hard. And, you know, I didn't get the puffy face stuff, but I'll tell you what, doing cardiovascular exercises up here is really, really hard. We have a bike that we use, if you can envision a stationary bike that doesn't have a seat and doesn't have handlebars, because we don't need either one of them. But you just pedal your heart out, and you don't have gravity on your side. So even the weight of your legs isn't helping you. So that's how we work really hard to make sure that our hearts stay healthy. But boy, they're tracking every bit of it. In terms of effects that I've had, I personally haven't had any cardiovascular effects. But when I come home, I certainly can. You know, for example, when we get back into 1G, and if we were to stand up, there's a really good chance we're going to pass out because our volume of blood has decreased, and all that blood suddenly ends up in our legs where it hasn't been for 5 or 6 months.
Hello, my name is Andrew. I'm an engineering student here. My question for you is, with starting a company, being an astronaut, being a father, and everything in between, how do you balance it all? Thanks again.
Hey, Andrew. Thank you for that question. I'll tell you what. You know, that perspective that you've got, I certainly appreciate that, because I feel the same way when I see other people juggling so many different things. I'm currently reading Da Vinci's biography by Walter Isaacson, and I'll tell you what, every time I turn the page, I just say, I can't believe this person did all of this. For me personally, I'll be honest, I don't feel like I'm juggling a lot of things, unless you consider juggling, you know, spending a lot of time with each ball and just loving it and spending, you know, all of your attention there, and then when it's time, you move on to the next ball. I personally don't know that I do a lot of things simultaneously. I just do the things that I'm really passionate about. I've been really fortunate in my career just to do things that I love. I absolutely love physics. Someday when I grow up, I'd love to get back to physics. I love aviation. I do that whenever I can, and I do that on the side. But again, I'm doing things because I love them, and it doesn't really feel like I'm juggling anything if that's why I'm doing it. But I really appreciate your perspective, and I don't want you to think that I don't feel the exact same way when I see some other people's accomplishments.
Hi, Josh. My name's Kyle. My son Isaac and I would like to know, what is your favorite movie about outer space or the NASA space program?
Hey, Kyle. Well, I should not be admitting this, and I think there are 6 other people here on the space station who are going to fix it. But I never saw Armageddon. I don't know what happened. There was like a window in my life where I just didn't get to that movie. So my understanding is that's probably going to happen in the next week or so because they all just learned that recently. But my favorite movie was actually a book that I read first, which was The Martian. I just loved the way that book treated the entire experience. You know, each chapter kind of alternated between very technical and then the storyline, and then very technical and the storyline, and then the movie handled it in a different but really cool way. So I think that one is by far my favorite. And plus, he did some gardening, and I've been doing some gardening up here.
My name is Genevieve, and you've done a lot of really hard things. What is the thing that you consider to be the hardest thing you've ever done, and how do you persevere through hard times?
Hi, Genevieve. I'll tell you what, I think the hardest thing is taking that first step, because it seems to me that things seem a lot more daunting than they actually are once you try it. I went into physics after high school for one reason, and the reason was physics was really hard. I didn't quite get it as a high schooler, and I really wanted to understand the way nature and the universe works. And so I had to do the daunting thing, which was to go try something that was really hard. Turns out it was hard because I didn't know the language. The language tends to be, sometimes it's jargon, sometimes it's math. In physics, sometimes it's both. But once you understand that language, boy, the concepts and the ability to build on that and go learn new stuff either for yourself or for society, it happens pretty naturally. You just have to take that first step, at least is my perspective. I have a term for it. I call it academic courage. It's not the fact that you're not afraid to try something new. You're plenty afraid, but you're willing to go do it anyway. And doing that in various academic settings, for me at least, has been incredibly rewarding, simply because at the end of the day, I find that this stuff is something that I can grasp as long as I know that language.
Hi, Josh. My name is Laura Davis. I'm from Jackson, Michigan. This is your first expedition, so congratulations on that. I'm wondering if there's something you've learned about yourself on this mission that's been surprising to you.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, this is my first mission, but as I mentioned earlier, we just rolled 100 days, so we've been up here for a while, and I'll tell you what, in that time, I guess the thing that is surprising is that no matter how much you don't want to believe it, we've all got limits. We've had some pretty long days. They say that this expedition in particular has been a pretty crazy one. We've had a lot of different things happen. We don't know any different. We're loving it. It keeps everything incredibly interesting. But we've had a series of long days and not a lot of reprieve. We get it whenever we can, and Mission Control treats us really well whenever they can, but sometimes it just can't be avoided. So there are points, last night was a great example where I just said, okay, that's it. Josh has had enough, and I actually went to bed. I want to say it was like 9:30 at night last night, and I slept really hard because my body needed it. So I think the thing that I've learned is there's a limit to everything and to everyone, and you just have to be sensitive to it.
Good morning. My name is Melanie. I'm a grad student in the Ford Public Policy School here. And I wanted to ask you your thoughts on what could we focus on as policymakers in the burgeoning global space policy area? What could we do to support space exploration?
Well, first of all, you probably shouldn't take policy advice from me. But I will tell you that I come from a world of fundamental physics, and I did my initial research at Fermilab just west of Chicago, where we were investigating the most fundamental building blocks of nature. And it wasn't because we had a particular purpose in something we were going to do with that, other than understand the universe at a more fundamental level. And I think, from my perspective, that's the thing we need to emphasize about exploration. We don't know what we're going to learn, and we can't count on very specific discoveries We just need to know that we're exploring and we're going to learn something, and it's going to be incredibly cool. You know, I'm reminded of people like J.J. Thomson, who discovered the electron. He discovered the electron because that was what he was passionate about, not because he was trying to generate this framework of electricity that we use in our homes and power the devices in our pockets. It was just fundamental physics that he was interested in. So I guess from a policy perspective, trying to hang your hat on a very specific discovery that's going to come is probably not the right path, because we never know what we're going to learn.
Let's take another question.
Hi, my name's Alexis. My question is, what is gravity like it's in space? Is it heavy or light?
So I love this question. There are some really smart people in the room who will tell you that the gravity that I'm feeling is a little bit different than the gravity you're feeling, but really it's essentially the same. I mean, almost entirely the exact same gravity. Right now, though, the gravity that you're feeling is pulling you into something hard, and you are on the floor, or maybe you're standing right now. I'm sorry, I can't see you. But you are feeling gravity push you into the ground because the Earth is pulling you. Well, the Earth is pulling us too. We're being pulled towards the Earth. We're just missing it because the Earth is bending away from us as we are falling towards it. So we just continue to fall and fall and fall until we direct it towards the water and we splash down back in March. So gravity is actually 100% the same thing right here in low Earth orbit. We're just feeling it in a very different way.
Josh, do you know how much more time we have?
Yeah, I think we can certainly do 5 or 6 minutes. This computer here tells me if we've got good connectivity, and it appears to me that we do.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, let's continue.
Hi, my name is Quinn, and I wanted to ask, what inspired you to be an astronaut?
Hi, Quinn. First of all, great name. That's our oldest child's name. So I found that I just really loved everything that led to this job. I loved doing the physics because that was something I happened to be passionate about. I happened to be passionate about aviation too. At the end of the day, it ended up being a pretty good fit for NASA, so they ended up taking me. Or it was a clerical error and they can't pull it back now because I'm already here. But it really, I was interested in being an astronaut, but I also knew that I couldn't count on it because so few people get this opportunity that you have to be loving what you're doing because being selected as an astronaut is a little bit like winning the lottery. You can't count on winning the lottery. If you do, that's not a very good retirement plan.
Hi, Josh. My name is Eamon, and I'm a student here at the University of Michigan studying aerospace engineering. And my question is, given the constraining environment of the ISS, what challenges do you come across when it comes to keeping yourself and the environment around you clean?
Hey, Eamon. Well, I'll tell you what. So first of all, cleaning up spills is actually not so bad. I kind of eat like a 6-year-old, I'll be honest, mostly because I think 6-year-olds make the best food decisions. They always pick the things that taste the best. So I've got a drink bag of tropical punch here, and I would never do this on Earth because you would never want to waste tropical punch. But watch what happens when you spill tropical punch. And I didn't waste a bit. I would have never gotten back to that on Earth. So it's a lot easier to manage things like that. But you're right, in terms of keeping your body clean, I've developed this technique up here. And people tell me I shouldn't do this on camera, but I'm happy to do it. I put water on my back, and then I just have my own little jacuzzi because the surface tension of water, it just sticks to my back, as opposed to like in your shower at home, it's wanting to fall off. Well, there's no force trying to pull it off here, so the surface tension just keeps it there, and then I can just do this little self-contained jacuzzi, and the water just moves around on my back. But it is a challenge to stay clean because we don't have running water. So I am very much looking forward to coming back and getting my first shower over the course of an entire hockey season or so.
Hi, Josh. I'm Mike. I'm a U of M Bachelor of Physics degree. Do you dream while sleeping on the space station? Specifically, have you or your fellow astronauts observed any sleep pattern changes on the space station? Dream more, less, same, differently?
Mike, I've never been asked this question specifically, and the answer for me is absolutely. The first 2 or 3 months here, my dreams were so incredibly vivid. I don't know that I can explain it. In fact, my very first dream in space, we were still in the Crew Dragon. We hadn't docked to the space station yet. But because of the phasing, it was going to take us quite a while to get to the space station. So we had 12 or 15 hours of really off-duty time, which just meant we weren't actively managing the spacecraft, or we didn't need to be. So we were able to sleep. And I remember I didn't wake up. I was dreaming, and we were just in our seats in the Crew Dragon, and there are these carbon fiber footrests at the end of them. But we weren't strapped in because we didn't have our boots on, so we're just floating. And I had a dream that there were some bugs on my feet. And so I started kicking my feet. Well, I ended up kicking the carbon fiber footrest, and poor Nicole, who was sitting to my left, woke up thinking the Crew Dragon was falling apart. And she could not understand when I kept saying, it was me, I was just kicking. And she couldn't understand because she was in such a deep sleep herself. In the end, she ended up doing it back to me, amazingly enough. About 3 hours later, she was kicking her carbon fiber footrest, and then she woke up and said, I have a dream. I was dreaming that I was falling. And I said, Nicole, you are. That's exactly what you're doing.
Okay, Josh, it's been a dream come true having you visit with us. And we have one last question, if that's okay, which is, when you get back to Earth, would you come and give a Saturday morning physics presentation?
My goodness, I would love to. That would absolutely make my day. And you don't even have to buy me off with donuts. It would be
That's
my
right.
pleasure.
We'll save some donuts. Okay. Are we done? Or I do have more questions, though. Okay, well, let me try one more question. How's that?
Give me one.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do one more. I'd hate to hang up on you in the middle. We're going to swap from one satellite to the next, and then it's this abrupt hang up. If that happens, I'm not hanging up in anger. I'm not mad at anyone.
That's right. We understand the technical issues. So this is from Wes and Quinn, who are fifth graders, and they want to know, what is the scariest thing that has happened to you in space?
So all that training we were talking about is incredibly accurate. In fact, we've had multiple malfunctions happen up here. You heard me use that term off-nominal. You never hear NASA talk about something going wrong. They say it's off-nominal, which I love that idea, because I can't imagine a more glasses half full kind of idea than calling something that went poorly off-nominal. But we've had multiple off-nominal situations that have happened up here. As I mentioned before, we don't know any different. We figure that's the way things are. But during the middle of the night, we get emergencies, we get warnings, we get all kinds of things that happen, and we deal with it just like it's our job. And that really speaks to the training that we've gotten, that it isn't something that is scary, because it just is our job. When things go wrong, that's what we do. And sometimes we do have to think on our feet, or our support team in Mission Control thinks on their feet. But we always have an option. We always have a solution. And so despite all the various things that have happened since we've been up here, we've always had an option. I think the scariest thing would be to be in a spot where there are no more options. And thankfully that hasn't happened. But things certainly have been interesting.
Okay. You're still here. So, Josh, what is an aspect of space life that you would like to bring back to Earth with you? That question is from Dustin.
Dustin, thank you for that one. And that's probably a great one, if I can get it in before we switch satellites. That's probably a great one for us to finish on. Because I'll tell you, if I could bring anything to the space station, it would be Detroit-style pizza, of course. But what I'd really like to do is bring everyone up here to kind of gain the perspective that you get from being up here. There is no portion of this planet that isn't absolutely breathtaking. We have clearly won the lottery in the universe. We have such a fragile but perfect planet, and we can't afford to mess that up. And I think once we all realize that we, all of us, all 7 billion of us, are on the same boat and we need to work together, I think we learn pretty quickly that some of the things that humans don't get along about, that stuff tends to be really trivial. And we just need to focus on what's important, which is keeping this planet and everybody else healthy.
That's great. Wonderful. And I'm so glad you're still here because we have a chance to really thank you again with a Michigan thanks.
Well, to everybody down in Ann Arbor and everybody who made the trip in, I can't thank you enough. You've absolutely made my Saturday. This is such an honor for me, and I think it goes without saying, go blue.
That's it, and there was quite a bit of bonus there. I think that the actual time limitation, which NASA told us was extremely strict, and we would end at exactly 11:40, it's 11:52. I don't think we should expect that in general from NASA. But that was great. It was wonderful, and your questions were wonderful, and you're wonderful. So we actually only have a few minutes left for questions and answers. John will come back up, and if you have any questions for him. If there are people who need to leave, we'll give you a few minutes to do that. And just before noon, we're going to have a special giveaway, so don't leave. Thank you, slide.
Nice bonus time.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. This event required tremendous effort on the part of many, many people. The technical aspect, getting the connection to NASA, using this room for the first time for Saturday Morning Physics, filming this and streaming it live. There are so many people who helped us with this, and here are the names of those people, and I really want to thank them tremendously. And are there any questions that you didn't get answered? Technical questions, etc. We need microphone.
I have one here. If you want to raise your hand.
It's coming.
Who's?
Oh, there it is. Okay, great. Can you help him with that?
Let's lower it.
Hi, my name is Nash. I don't know if any of you can answer this, but I wanted to know how long are you in space on average for an expedition?
How long?
How long is the expedition?
Yeah, usually 6 months.
6 months. Great question. Okay.
You want to ask a question?
Yeah. Actually, I have a question. What is space made of?
Do you want to take that one? Well, I'll tell you this. Space is not empty. There's a lot of stuff in space, and where the space station is, there's probably still some of the Earth's atmosphere up there a little bit that slows it down, as you mentioned.
Yeah, actually, the space station is flying through ionized gas, plasma, actually. So little bit of oxygen, little bit of nitrogen, so it's still gas there. But far, far away, between stars, there's not a whole lot of anything there.
About 1 hydrogen atom per cubic centimeter. Or proton, really, probably more like ionized. Okay. Another question?
Here, right here.
Great.
Has anybody sent a question from a black hole?
What kind of information comes from a black hole? That's a black hole information question. We have had, there's a Saturday morning physics presentation from last spring by Professor Leo Pandozeas, which addresses that, and so I'm not an expert. If there's anybody here who would like to take that on, it's a really interesting question because black holes are not static things. They change, and information is related to an exotic physics term we use called entropy. Next.
What's the longest time you could last on the ISS?
Yeah, so there was Scott Kelly stayed on there for about a year, so you can stay longer than that, but they are, as Josh said, there's some health effects that accumulate over time, and we're studying them. So staying too long may not be healthy. So 1 year is probably long enough. Going to Mars, you'll have to be in space on 6 months to a year. So that year time limit is a good one because we don't expect to be even going to Mars to be on a spaceship longer than that. And so, yeah, so that's a great question, and it's still under study actually.
I feel like we should just keep going as we did with Josh. Here's a question over here.
What do you wear when you're training underwater?
Oh, yeah.
What do you wear when you're training underwater was the question.
Yeah, those astronauts use their full spacesuit when they train underwater.
My name is Karen, and do you go out of the space station and see any planets?
Oh, so they see stars for sure, but they would still need telescope to see the planets. I think there was a picture of the moon that they saw as well. So you can see it.
What are black holes made out of?
We'll let you take that.
Everything that they started with. So black holes form at the end of the lives of certain stars when they collapse and just keep collapsing and collapsing and collapsing. So whatever the star was made of, which most stars at that age are mostly made of hydrogen and helium.
Okay.
But they're not hydrogen and helium anymore once they compress.
Hi, my name is Colin, and I have the question about the ISS. Does it have escape pods?
That's a good question. It has escape vehicles. There are enough vehicles on board to evacuate all astronauts if there's something bad happen. So that's why it has those 6 ships can be docked to it at any given time, and there's usually 6 astronauts on board. That's why they don't want to really go over that limit. So it's an excellent question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Over here.
I was curious, how do you observe nuclear fusion and rogue black holes? Because those are usually my main fields of interest, is rogue black holes and nuclear fusion in particular. Like, what are some ways that you observe them and learn about them?
I didn't get that one.
Did you hear it?
No.
I didn't quite catch that.
How do you observe nuclear fusion and rogue black holes?
Nuclear fusion.
And rogue black holes, too. Like, how do you observe them?
So I can take the fusion part. You take the black hole because I have no idea. Yeah, but so fusion occurs in the sun, and we see the particles coming off the sun, like the protons and helium and the solar wind. So the fusion process is happening. That's our energy source for the solar system. But your question about the black hole,
Fusion near black holes would, we observe the fusion in the sun actually because of the energy that the sun gives us, and we understand that. But also what is coming out of the center of the sun where this is happening are neutrinos. These exotic particles called neutrinos. That's the main thing that we've been observing. And now we understand more about neutrinos and more about the sun from the research that's been done. If this were to happen near black holes, I think it would be similar. There are also other kinds of radiation that could be seen. But this is not a major energy source in black holes because the nuclear reactions wouldn't be the same.
My name is Miles. If a space station or an astronaut goes by a black hole, what happens?
It would be sucked in and shrunk into a singularity.
Let me tell you, when you get a question like that, time slows down. And that's what happens near black holes as well. So that's one of the things. Another thing is that there would be more gravity, gravitational forces. And if the satellite's in free fall, like the space station, the astronaut would feel something different. But near a black hole, there would be something different, I think, which would be that the difference in gravity over a short distance, which is what causes the tides, actually. So we call those tidal forces, would probably be more significant and may affect the physiology, the satellite itself, etc. That's speculation. But I mean, some of that is absolutely accurate. But exactly how people would feel is speculation, I think.
Question about the orbit. How did NASA determine the orbit that the space station continues to be in?
So actually I did have a chart on that. Maybe I can go to, here we are. So the orbital inclination is 51.6 degrees. So that inclination, so space station is orbiting this, the Earth is rotating under it, so it's a sinusoid pattern mapped onto the Earth, and that takes over 90% of the habitable portions on planet Earth. So it passes over 90% of all and about 3/4 of the land mass. If you had a polar orbit, the coverage would be essentially 100%, because the Earth rotates under that orbit, and this trace moves eastward. And so 51.6 is a good compromise to that orbital inclination is a good compromise to pass over to do imaging of 90% of where everybody is. Yeah.
Yeah. Couple more questions, Carol.
What is it like to use the bathroom in space?
I think that was a question for Josh and
yeah,
and John.
I'm surprised that question wasn't asked of him. Yeah, but I did have the picture of the bathroom though, and I will if I go to it really quickly. It's in the Russian station has the best picture, but it's not unlike bathroom here on Earth. But there's you in free fall, so there's a lot of vacuum components associated with it. The interesting thing about the bathroom in space, they separate the number 2 stuff from the number 1 stuff, which is nice because they have a water recycling system on board space station because it's expensive to send water to space station. So they actually recycle urine. That's water, right? So you can extract the water from the urine and reuse that, and it's drinkable. And they have this equipment on space station. So that's this is the tube for extracting the liquid parts, and this is the solid waste part here. It's just stored away.
Hi, my name is Joey, and what material do they have to use in spacesuits so oxygen can stay in and not let it go out of the suit?
Yeah, so it's a plastic-like material to seal the astronaut up. So I would say that it's a sort of a plastic-like material, and with a Kevlar, like bulletproof vest type material for protection, but mostly polymers or plastics to the spacesuit is composed of. The new spacesuits are going to be even more sophisticated because they will need them to provide some kind of radiation protection as well, because right now when they go out in space, they're exposed to space radiation, and the suits don't protect them from that, so they can't stay out too long.
Thank you.
Great question.
Hi, my name is Michelle, and how do you eat in space, like if your food flies all over the place?
Yeah, well, I think Josh showed you how you eat. You kind of let it float into your mouth, I guess. But particles do float around, and they have vacuums all over station to suck up those particles. So I think I would imagine, and this would have been a good question for Josh to ask about the solid food part, is how in practice they do that. Old space food used to be in tubes, and you just kind of like pushed it into your mouth. But the food now is really similar to food here on Earth, and they're just able to just put it in the mouth and chew it. As long as you don't let it float away, and then it's going to rot, right? And you have all sorts of bad things happening, but you just have to keep track.
How far is the largest star from Earth?
So the closest star is 4.3 light years away. It's Proxima Centauri, which is quite far away. But that's the star.
So that's all the questions we had. It's awesome. Thank you so much for those great questions. Thanks to John for taking the questions and answering them. And your lecture, and for helping me with the black hole questions. And we thank you all for coming. This was just amazing. What a wonderful event. We have some t-shirts to give away, so you can grab those on your way out. Especially the younger folks. We want to see you all back at Saturday Morning Physics. We have a great lineup for the winter and spring. And thank you again, everybody. And thanks to Josh, huh?
Yeah.